Magic Johnson, a man forged in the unforgiving furnace of American poverty, where dreams were luxuries and survival was the only currency that mattered. His name thunders across 5 decades like a prophecy carved into basketball history. 5 NBA championships gleaming like distant stars. 3 MVP crowns weighing heavy with expectation. 12 all-star selections that transformed arenas into temples of worship. Over 17,000 points scored, each one a defiant declaration against a world that once called him Trash Boy. More than 10,000 assists, proof that greatness multiplies when shared. And when a virus tried to erase him from existence in 1991, when doctors delivered a death sentence and the world prepared his eulogy, Magic didn't simply survive. He erupted back to life, built a billion-dollar empire from the ashes, and became one of the most powerful athlete entrepreneurs America has ever witnessed. But behind that legacy, behind the smile that lit up stadiums, lies a story not glamorous, but devastating. A journey carved through childhood humiliation, through illness that threatened everything, through betrayal and losses so profound they would have shattered lesser souls. Before we begin, if Magic Johnson's smile ever gave you hope during your darkest hour, if his courage reminded you that survival is possible, leave a like as tribute to the boy who carried garbage at dawn so he could carry his family toward light. Behind the thunder of global fame lies a cruel truth. Magic Johnson's first stage was not lit with dazzling spotlights, but with the cold Michigan darkness of 4 a.m., where his father's garbage truck rattled through frozen streets, collecting the refuse of families who looked down on them. Born August 14, 1959, in Lansing, Michigan, Earvin Johnson Jr. entered a world where 10 siblings shared beds, blankets, and air that often felt too thin to breathe, where dinner portions were measured with mathematical precision so everyone might eat something. His father, Earvin Sr., worked brutal shifts at the General Motors plant, his hands scarred and calloused from assembly line work, then woke before sunrise to drive that garbage truck through neighborhoods that whispered behind curtains and locked their doors as he passed. His mother, Christine, scrubbed classroom floors on her knees until her hands cracked and bled, came home smelling of industrial cleaner and exhaustion, her back bent from hours of labor that paid barely enough to keep lights on and children fed. Magic would later confess with eyes that still carried the pain. I could hear my mother's sigh before I saw her face, that weary sound of someone who'd given everything and had nothing left. That's how I knew she was tired, how I knew we were struggling, how I knew I needed to be better, do more, become more. Poverty didn't knock at their door politely asking permission. It lived with them like an unwanted relative, ate with them at every meal, slept in rooms where laughter fought to survive against the suffocating weight of endless struggle. But the deepest wound, the one that carved itself into his soul with surgical precision, came not from hunger that twisted his stomach or cold that numbed his fingers, but from the neighborhood children who turned cruelty into sport and sharpened their voices into weapons designed to pierce his heart. Around 1964, when Magic rode beside his father on weekend trash routes, helping lift heavy bins, despite being just a small boy with thin arms, they began calling him Trash Boy. Not once in passing, not twice as a joke, but so often he could predict the rhythm of their laughter before it arrived, could feel it coming like a storm he couldn't escape. The smell of garbage clung to his jacket like shame made visible, like evidence of unworthiness he wore for everyone to judge. He would scrub his coat on Sunday nights until his hands hurt, praying desperately that Monday morning would bring invisibility instead of humiliation, that somehow the smell would vanish and the teasing would stop. But it never did. He confessed decades later, long after he'd conquered the world. That name stayed with me longer than any smell ever could. It carved itself into my soul. It made me question everything. At age 7, too young to understand injustice but old enough to feel its sting, he wondered Why doing the right thing hurt so much? Why helping his father, a man who worked himself into exhaustion to keep them alive, made him a target for cruelty he'd done nothing to deserve? These were wounds that didn't bleed, didn't leave visible scars, but they changed everything about who he would become. They planted seeds of defiance so deep that 30 years later, sitting in billion-dollar boardrooms making decisions that shaped cities, he would still feel them growing, still hear those children laughing, still smell that garbage. From neglect, he carved resolve hard as steel. From rejection, he learned defiance that would eventually shake the very foundations of American sports and business. Armed with nothing but stubborn will and bruises of rejection deeper than any physical pain, young Earvin faced another betrayal in 1971. The year integration reshaped Lansing's schools. He expected to attend Sexton High, a predominantly black school where he dreamed he might finally breathe freely. Instead, the district reassigned him to Everett High. The bus carrying black students rattled under thrown stones. Sometimes windows shook so violently he clenched his fists in silence, swallowing rage that had nowhere safe to go. Inside the gym, teammates refused to pass him the ball. Locker room conversations died the moment he stepped inside. Coaches looked past him as though he were invisible, a ghost haunting a space that didn't want him. The message settled on him with the force of a verdict. You do not belong here. Years later, he reflected quietly, there's a look people give you, the kind that says your presence is a mistake. That loneliness didn't scream. It suffocated. It made 14-year-old Earvin question whether the world had already drawn a small, tight circle he wasn't meant to fit inside. But even as these wounds tightened around him, something fierce refused to die. Before sunrise in 1973, around 5 a.m., while Lansing still slept beneath winter's brutal grip, he slipped onto empty concrete courts behind his neighborhood. Michigan's winter bit into his skin like punishment. His breath rose like smoke. His hands trembled on the ball from cold, and something deeper, hunger for validation the world refused to give. But here, on this cracked concrete, no one mocked him. No one turned away. The court didn't care about race, poverty, or the echo of trash boys still lodged in his memory like shrapnel. It accepted him fully, fiercely, without conditions or judgment. And so he poured every insult, every cold stare. Every night he cried quietly into his pillow, into the rhythm of that ball. Dribble, step, pass. Again and again, until his fingers went numb. His no-look passes weren't born from flair or showmanship. They were born from survival, from a desperate need to create a world where he mattered beyond the garbage roots. Then came the night that changed everything. In 1974, at age 15, in a dim high school gym smelling of dust and old wood, his body seemed powered by something beyond muscle or youth. 36 points, 18 rebounds, 16 assists. Numbers that didn't belong to a teenager, but to a phenomenon being born before witnesses who couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. A local reporter looked up from the stat sheet, eyes wide, and whispered the word that would follow him forever: magic. Hearing it, he froze. Part of me loved it, he later recalled, but part of me feared I'd never live up to it. When he ran home to tell his mother, Christine warned gently, "Only God performs magic, son." The weight of that name settled on his shoulders like destiny and burden intertwined. But fate had other plans. By 1979, Magic was no longer the trash boy from Lansing's forgotten streets. He was the #1 overall NBA draft pick, chosen by the Los Angeles Lakers with expectations so massive they could crush mountains. His rookie contract, though modest by today's standards at around $600,000 annually, represented more wealth than his entire family had seen across generations of struggle. Within months, he wasn't just playing basketball, he was redefining it completely, transforming the Lakers into Showtime, a phenomenon that married athleticism with artistry until the line between sport and spectacle dissolved into pure magic. By 1980, at just 20 years old, he stood in the NBA Finals, filling in for injured Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at center, a position he'd never played in his life. That night he delivered 42 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, a performance so transcendent it seemed to violate the laws of basketball itself. The performance didn't just win a championship. It announced the arrival of greatness so undeniable, the earth seemed to tilt beneath its weight. By 1982, he'd won another championship. By 1985, another. By 1987, yet another, cementing a dynasty that would define an entire decade. The world saw triumph, championships stacking like monuments to excellence, magazine covers, endorsement deals worth millions, the adoration of millions of fans who worshipped his every move. But behind the cameras, behind the smile that never seemed to fade, the truth was different and darker. Fame brought isolation so profound that even surrounded by thousands in screaming arenas, Magic felt alone in ways he'd never experienced on those frozen Lansing courts. The pressure to perform, to be Magic every single night, to never disappoint, never falter, never show weakness, began grinding down the human being inside the legend like millstones crushing grain. Sleep became a luxury he could rarely afford. Privacy vanished completely. Every smile had to be perfect, every word measured for public consumption, every gesture calculated to maintain the image that millions demanded. His relationships strained under the weight of fame and expectation. Trust became nearly impossible when everyone wanted something, when friendship felt transactional, when he couldn't tell who loved Earvin and who loved Magic. By 1987, after 5 championships and 3 MVP awards, his income exceeded $10 million annually through salary and lucrative endorsement deals with Converse, Pepsi, and other major brands. He owned properties in Beverly Hills that his childhood self couldn't have imagined in the wildest dreams, drove luxury cars that cost more than his childhood home had been worth, lived in a world suspended so far above Lansing that sometimes he wondered if that garbage truck kid still existed somewhere inside him. Yet the higher he climbed, the more he discovered what altitude costs, what success demands when it becomes your identity. The spotlight that once felt like validation, like proof he'd escaped the humiliation, began feeling like surveillance, relentless and suffocating, watching his every move for mistakes. Power, as Magic discovered during those glittering years, carries a heartbreaking price that no championship ring can ever offset, no trophy can ever balance. When Magic first heard the words HIV positive on November 7, 1991, the cameras captured shock, but they could not capture the storm tearing through his soul. He was 32 years old, newly married to Cookie, at the absolute peak of his powers. The diagnosis arrived like an executioner's blade, swift and merciless. In that moment, the empire meant nothing. The championships turned to dust. The future he'd imagined, children growing up with a father present for every milestone, grandchildren climbing into his lap, all of it evaporated like morning mist under harsh sunlight. The world prepared his funeral. Magazines printed obituaries. Experts predicted he had 2, maybe 3 years left. His mother wept until her body had no tears remaining. Cookie stood beside him, 7 weeks pregnant, facing terror so absolute it defied language. Magic later confessed, "I thought I was dead. I thought I'd killed my wife. I thought my child would never know me." The guilt crushed him harder than any defender ever could. He would wake at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, counting his remaining days like a prisoner marking walls. Then came the losses that carved even deeper. In 1994, his closest friend from childhood, a man who knew him before the name Magic existed, died suddenly. The grief arrived in waves so powerful, Magic couldn't breathe through them. In 2007, his father, Earvin Sr., the man who worked himself to exhaustion so his children might have better, passed away. Magic held his father's hand as life slipped away, remembering those frozen mornings on the garbage truck, understanding finally that his father's sacrifice wasn't weakness, but the fiercest form of love. In 2013, his sister died of cancer. Each loss stripped away another layer of protection until Magic stood emotionally naked before mortality. Meanwhile, his HIV status became public property. People recoiled from his handshake. Teammates refused to play against him. Children were pulled away when he visited schools, parents whispering that he was dangerous. The cruelty didn't come only from strangers. It came from people he'd called friends, colleagues, brothers. Men who'd celebrated championships beside him now crossed the street to avoid him. The isolation was absolute, suffocating. But Magic, the boy who'd survived Trash Boy, refused to let the virus write his ending. In 2025, at age 66, Magic Johnson stands not as a victim of tragedy, but as a living monument to human resilience. His daily routine begins before dawn with medications that keep the virus undetectable, a regimen requiring discipline most people will never comprehend. Antiretrovirals taken at precise times, no exceptions. Blood tests, monitoring CD4 counts and viral loads. Doctor visits that map his survival in numbers and markers most people never have to learn. His health requires constant vigilance. The medications that saved his life also bring side effects, fatigue that settles into bones, occasional nausea, the knowledge that one missed dose could tip the balance. Yet he rises every morning, looks at that pill bottle, and chooses life again. His net worth, now exceeding $1.5 billion, stands as final proof that a determined soul can carve empires from the harshest beginnings. His Beverly Hills estate, a multi-million-dollar sanctuary behind private gates, stretches across expansive hillside acreage with terraced stone pathways and glass-wrapped hallways glowing gold at sunrise. His Dana Point villa sits atop a cliffside facing the Pacific, while his Palm Springs desert compound offers refuge when the world becomes too loud. His real estate portfolio, shopping centers, mixed-use developments, office towers, generates wealth quietly and steadily. His ownership stakes in the Dodgers, Sparks, LAFC, and Commanders represent power most athletes never approach. His collection includes a Rolls-Royce Phantom, a Mercedes Maybach, a Bentley Continental GT. Patek Philippe and Audemars Piguet timepieces rest in climate-controlled cases. Private aviation carries him between time zones, between responsibilities. But the greatest luxury isn't the estates or the cars. It is time itself. The ability to live long enough to enjoy sunsets he once feared he'd never see, to hold grandchildren he thought would never exist. His family surrounds him now. Cookie, his anchor through every storm. Their son EJ, living openly and proudly. Daughter Elisa, son Andre, working beside him to shape the Johnson legacy for generations to come. Through his foundation, Magic has funneled millions toward HIV awareness, healthcare access, youth programs, community development, not as celebrity gesture, but as someone who understands what it means to fight long battles in silence. Magic often reflects, strength isn't the days you feel good. Strength is choosing to live on the days you don't. And that is the truth. At the center of his extraordinary journey, championships made him a legend. Business made him powerful. But survival, faithful, disciplined, courageous survival made him extraordinary. Illness does not define him. Courage does. His life whispers an essential truth. Success means little if it doesn't lift someone else. He breathes deeper now, after 34 years of defying predictions, reflects deeper on mortality and meaning, loves deeper, understanding that relationships matter more than rings. And as long as Magic Johnson wakes each morning and reaches for the pill that keeps tomorrow alive, the fight continues not for fame or history, but simply for life itself.